All right, let's get into some real world problems. So you can be given the real world problems a lot of different ways. I gave it to you on a graph just so we could try to work it out that way. If you're going to write the equation, you're trying to think, okay, I want to write it in y equals mx plus b is usually your best format for you to write it in. You could also write it, you might have to start by writing it in point slope, which is fine also. But just knowing how to go between the two kind of interchangeably. So if we were going to do this, all right, you're going to look, and if you look at this graph, you have lots of different points you can choose from. I like this point just because this is a really easy point, 6, 0, like easy peasy. And then if I picked like this point, I could pick, this is 5, 50. You could come over here and you could pick any of these other points and you would be fine, all right? Like this is 1, 300, okay? Whichever point you want to pick, but you got to pick 2, okay? So I'll pick this one and this one just so I have those 2 to work with. And we're going to set up, first you have to find what your slope is going to be. Well, to do that, you need to do slope formula, which is your y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. So if I set up and I make this my x1, this is my y1, this is my x2, this is my y2, again, use whatever points you want, just be consistent. I'm going to have 0 minus 300 over 6 minus 1. Okay, if I do that, I'm going to get negative 300 over 5. And then if I were to divide that, all right, you're thinking, okay, I have to be able to divide. This is a problem you should be able to divide. So this is negative 5 goes into 36 times, and then you have your extra 0. So our slope value is negative 60. Okay, now we're going to take that and we're going to plug it into this equation. Again, use the easiest point possible. The easiest point possible is this first one. Y minus 0 is equal to negative 60 x minus x1, which is 6. Okay, we're going to take this. That's your point slope. Again, technically you could leave it in that form, but if we went ahead and distributed, we're just going to rewrite this side as y is equal to negative 60x. Negative 60 times negative 6 is going to give us positive 360. So that would be the equation that you would get from there. All right. So basically what that's telling us is this is talking about distance traveled. So you started at that 360, and then every hour, because your x value is in hours, you're taking off 60 miles. So 60 miles, 60 miles, 60 miles, 60 miles, until eventually after 6 hours, you have 0 miles left to go. So you guys can kind of see it that way. All right, so we're going to do the next one. The next one's all about quadratics. So if we look at the next one on quadratics, in this case, I gave you an equation just so you could see it a little bit differently. This is the path that a ball is thrown. So automatically it's negative, and if you just think about the path of a ball, that means it looks, something like this. Some little kid, or I don't know, whatever, threw the ball, and then he threw it, it arced, and then it hit somewhere else. All right. So there's different questions that they can ask you from that. What is the y-intercept, and what does that represent? How long until the ball hits the ground? Again, you're getting all different kinds of things. So on the first one, what is the y-intercept? Your constant is always your y-intercept. So in this case, our constant is 10. So this does not do a great job at telling us what like our y-axis represents. So let's just say feet. Could be anything. So our y-intercept is 10, and what does that represent? Well, that means that when the ball was thrown, that person or whatever it was thrown from was 10 feet off the ground. So 10 feet represents height off the ground when thrown. Okay, so maybe they were standing in the second story and they threw it off a second story and saw what happened. I don't know. But 10 feet is our y-intercept. So this is our y-intercept. Because that's your constant, Again, we picked feet. You could just say that 10 is, and it represents the height off the ground. Okay, the next thing's asking how long till it hits the ground. So when you throw a ball, okay, you throw the ball, here it goes, and then it hits the ground right here. Well, when it hits the ground, your height is 0 feet, which means your Y value is 0 feet. So if we come over here and we plug in 0, then we're gonna try to work our way through and solve. Okay, so now in this case, your best bet in solving is going to be to factor. Now, when you guys are factoring, again, make sure that whatever you normally follow is what you're sticking to. So we haven't talked a ton about factoring, but you did do it in Algebra 1. So I like to do this X method. So your top is your A times C, and your bottom is your B. So A times C is negative 2 times 10. So we're trying to find something that multiplies to give us negative 20, but adds to give us positive 8. So in that case, that's going to be positive 10 and negative 2. So if we rewrite this, we're going to rewrite it as t plus 10, t minus 2. And now you have to make sure that you're taking into account the fact that this A value is here. So when you put this A value in, all right, you have to make sure that you are dividing by that negative 2. So that's called the bottoms up method. And so if I'm dividing by that negative 2, or if you think about rewriting it like this, so if you rewrite it as negative 2t, and then you rewrite it as 10t minus 2t plus 10, if you think about this like this, and you can factor out piece by piece, over here you're going to factor out a negative 2t, and what's going to be left inside is going to be just a t and then a minus 5. And then over here, if we factor out from here a negative 2, so we factor out a negative 2, we're going to be left with, again, t minus 5. You pull down what they have in common. So they have in common negative 2t minus 2, and they have in common t minus 5. So there's two different ways that you can factor. You can factor where you set up grouping and come like this, or if you come over here and you divide this larger one by the negative 2t, all right, you're going to say, okay, this does divide, and I'm going to bring it down, and I'm going to say, okay, this divides into that, so it's going to be t minus 5. And then you always have to have one that has that starting A value. Usually it's the one that doesn't divide evenly, but in this case, negative 2 would also divide here. So you would get negative 2t. You would just pull this out to the front, minus 2. This way is nicer just because it makes a little bit more sense. This way kind of gets ugly. But anyways, this would be your two factors. Okay, and then from there, we're going to set them up and we're going to find which one would be where the ball hits. Well, if I set this one equal to 0, you have t minus 5 is equal to 0. Well, then we add 5, and then we add 5, and we get t equals 5. If you try to do this one, and this line's going to get in the way, but if I have negative 2t minus 2 and I set this equal to 0, I add 2, and I get negative 2t is equal to positive 2, which means that t is equal to negative 1. Well, it doesn't make sense that my time would be negative, so this is not the one I'm using. I would be using this one. This is a hard problem. I doubt that they're going to do something like that, but if they do, then this was kind of an example for you guys to see. Again, this kind of is the two different formats that you can do it. This one's called bottoms up. This one, you separate by grouping using these values right here. So we rewrote 8t as a positive 10t and a negative 2t, and then split up using grouping. All right, so that one was kind of difficult, but if you need help with that, again, you can always check in with me and I can help you with that too. All right.